Good evening, everyone. My name is Russ Ganim, and I am Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs at the University of Iowa. It is my great pleasure to be with you this evening to host for the third time our Global Alumni Spotlight Series. Please let me thank our communications and constituent relations team in international programs, as well as the University of Iowa Center for Advancement for their help in putting together tonight's program. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function, and we will read them at the end of the conversation. The goal of the Global Alumni Spotlight Series is to showcase the accomplishments of UI graduates who are either from international destinations and/or who have distinguished themselves in global venues. Shirley Shao fits this definition perfectly. Shirley Hwei-Chung graduated from the University of Iowa with a Master of Science degree in Statistics and Actuarial Science in 1979. As an international student on campus, Shirley found the University of Iowa to be very welcoming, and she was struck by the sincerity of the people she met. After completing her graduate program, Shirley went on to enjoy professional advancement in the actuarial field at corporations such as AIA China, China Life, Prudential Financial, Tillinghast, John Hancock, and Mass Mutual. She landed executive level positions, in particular CFO, Chief Actuary, and Executive Vice President, at a time when few women had occupied those roles previously. Having lived and worked in Shanghai, Taiwan, Beijing, Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York, Shirley truly has a global perspective on issues related to the actuarial industry, work environments, cultures, and professional volunteering. Please join us for a conversation with Shirley Shao to learn more about her experience at the University of Iowa, as well as her thoughts on cultivating a successful career that has spanned the globe. We will also look for her to give advice to current students and young professionals. Shirley Shao, welcome. We are honored to have you with us this evening.
Hi, Dean Russ. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Such an honor to be here to spend the hour with you.
It is our pleasure. And so, Shirley, you're actually joining us from Los Angeles tonight. So that's great. And tell us what you're doing in Los Angeles this evening.
Well, actually, this time I actually visited my family. I have two sisters here. One sister actually also graduated from Iowa. So I'm visiting family. This time I haven't been to Los Angeles for 4 years now. So it's great to be back here.
Very good.
I do have a home here. I just do not come to visit.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, listen, again, Shirley, thank you for spending time with us this evening. Let me just ask the first question, and it's kind of an obvious one, but how did you learn about the University of Iowa, and how did you come here in the first place?
Let me give you a little bit of background. I was born and raised in Taipei, Taiwan, and I majored in business. So actually, I wasn't that great a student, but it's like all my friends decided to come to the States. So I just came along, and I asked my professor at that time, and he actually graduated from University of Iowa. So he recommended me University of Iowa, and so that's how I came. So it was I never left the country before that time, so I have no idea what to expect. I do not understand that U.S. The U.S. What I saw was what I saw on the TV, or not TV. Actually, we didn't have much TV at that time, but more like on the movies, So I did not know there's a difference between East Coast, West Coast, or Midwest. So it was quite a experience for me. I still remember when I landed in Cedar Rapids. It was a very small airport. I was so shocked to see all the cornfields all the way to Iowa City. It was just very different than the populous Taipei.
Right, because you came from a very, very large city that was densely populated, on a small island, where it must have been kind of a shock to come to the U.S. and see this these wide expanses of land. So cornfields and prairies and just, flying overhead, where you don't see any towns, you don't see any villages. It's just landscape. So that had to be a different experience for you, I would think.
Very, very different. And then the work was different as well. I find myself, I have to sit in front of the desk to study all the time. I didn't do that when I was in college. So I partied during the college. So that was also tough. So it was tough all the way around, and not to mention the language barriers and stuff like that. So it was a very different experience, but I have to say Iowa was just so beautiful. I still remember Iowa River looking outside from my dorm. I remember the fall foliage. I also, the first time I saw fall foliage, and also the first time I saw snow in my life. Although that year I had quite a few blizzards, but I didn't know any better. So I also adore American food. I love cafeteria food.
Oh, you love cafeteria food. That's
not too many people can say that. It was the first experience cafeteria food. I love whipped cream. So I gained about 10 pounds that the first year I was in Iowa. But mostly I definitely remember the people so well. So I actually first came to the MBA program. I didn't start with the actuarial program. I came to the MBA program, and my advisor Ed had helped me quite a bit. I also had a couple other students help me because I actually did not understand what was happening in the class, because there were a lot of discussions and I couldn't follow the discussions because everybody's accent is so different, and I didn't even understand the teacher, let alone with so many discussions going on. So, and also we had to do research paper. I never written a paper in my life, so it was very, very struggling. So it was just, I really was thankful to all the people who helped me along the way.
Right, because you had to do a lot of this work on your own. Yes. Probably not a lot of people prepared you for study in the US. I mean, that it's a little bit different now, where we try to provide more guidance to international students to let them know kind of what to expect in terms of studying, in terms of their courses, in terms of interacting with professors. But probably when you came to the United States in the mid to late 70s, international students just kind of showed up and went to class, and it was up to them to sort of sink or swim, right?
Right. Well, so yes, so yes, you're absolutely right. And I think thank God for the people. I really have to say about the people I met in Iowa. I think later, as you mentioned, I work in quite a few cities in the East Coast. And that's when I really find out the people in Iowa are really different. They're really respectful and really patient and just kind people. I don't know how to say that. So they really helped me along the way, even though there wasn't any formal programs, but they came up and rescued me. So really appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad that you got to experience Iowa Nice, because it is real. And I think we try to extend that notion and that practice of Iowa Nice, especially to international students, to make them feel welcome at the University of Iowa, because international students are a huge part of our community. They contribute in immeasurable ways, and we very much appreciate what our international students contribute to our campus. And so we want to make sure that they succeed, and that we as a campus are invested in their success. And so that's a tradition that goes back a long way. Even before you came here, we received our first international student in, I think it was 1850 or something like that. It was a long time ago, and so we try to keep that tradition going. But I know you started in the MBA program, but you didn't stay there. You switched after a semester, or yes, I don't know how long.
I switched after a semester because, as I mentioned, I have a sister who also, she's 1 year young. She's 1 year younger, and she's interested in also coming to Iowa. But she said she didn't want to be in a business program. She wanted me to look into some other program. So that's when I kind of came across actuarial science. So I decided to try one semester. So I got both departments to agree that if I don't succeed in actuarial science, I can come back to MBA. They still let me. They still would allow me to take those credits with me. So that's why I started with the actuarial science program. It was just very simple. I was just motivated by people telling me it's very easy to find a job in the actuarial field. And I remember the MBA program had about, I don't know, 300 students. And I was looking at myself, I thought, my goodness, I could not get a job. I cannot compete with these people. I wouldn't even give myself a job. I was like, so how can I compete? And then I went to the actuarial science program. They had 7 students. So I thought, wow, 7 students. I probably could get a job if
right.
7 students. That's just very simple motivation to make me move over there. So
well, you're a very practical person, and
yes,
you're probably saying to yourself, okay, there's not a lot of competition here.
I didn't ask I look at the supply. I didn't ask the demand. So
exactly. But that's fine. I mean, that was the time when supply side economics was kind of in fashion, and so you continued with that trend, especially when you looked at the job market. So tell us what, I mean, obviously there are the practical considerations that you looked at actuarial science. There weren't a lot of students there. But what attracted you to the program? Could you tell us a little bit about the courses, about the faculty, and then maybe the other students at the time that you were here?
Mm-hmm. As I said, it was a very small program. Mm-hmm. So what I learned there, actually my math was very poor. But as a Chinese person, the poor math is considered above average in US.
Yes,
it's kind of
that
a
is
different
true.
standard. I'm sorry to say that, but it's so. But my math was not that good. So I went there. Initially, I really struggled because I just didn't know how to do math, and there were a lot of math courses at the beginning. So, but then after a while, I figure, this is the way I think. I think, should I go back to the business world, which I'm a little bit more familiar because I did get an undergrad degree on that, or should I learn something new? Then I decided that I want to learn something new. This is a chance for me to actually pick up something that I didn't have before. And one course that really helped me along the way, actually all the way through, is the theory of finance. And that's really talking about interest theory, talking about how interest rates are calculated, how do you calculate annuities and stuff like that. That's the first time I actually had that course. And later on, I actually recommend that course to everybody I know. I think regardless of where you are, which department, because it will help you understand finance, and that will help you for the rest of your life. Basically, I'm still using what I'm learning at that point. So I thought, wow, some of the stuff I learned, I thought, wow, I can actually apply in life. Originally, I thought these math programs are kind of, theoretical, but the actuarial science actually has something for me at that point. I can see the day-to-day application of the stuff I learned. So that's what attracted me.
Right. So again, it's kind of that practical aspect that you could, apply what you were learning to real life experiences. And it must have been interesting at that time because, again, I don't know anything about actuarial sciences, but I do know that technology has really developed, computer algorithms, probably calculate most actuarial tables nowadays, but that wasn't the case back then. So tell us a little bit about, kind of how life expectancy was calculated, how you did these things by hand or with calculators, because it's now you probably just plug in a bunch of numbers and there are these elaborate programs that just, create all of these spreadsheets and give you the graphs and the data. But I'm interested to learn what kind of that actuarial practice, or that methodology was like back in the 70s and 80s.
Wow, at the risk of really dating me, but let me, okay. let me tell you my first internship. This is another thing that's great in Iowa. They actually have internship program. They have companies come in to interview students. So I was so lucky. I got a job with Mutual of Omaha. I never drove in my life. And that was the first time I drove. It took me like, I don't know, 10 hours to get there. I was like, anyway, and then I found out my job. And again, just a whole bunch of wonderful people I met there. To this day, I still remember the warm feeling I have for those people. But then I was given these sheets, okay? These are large sheets with, so my job as a summer intern is to adding all the numbers down and adding all the numbers across. Okay. And make sure at the end, all the numbers across and then down actually end up with the same total sum, you know. So that's how I spent the summer, you know, working in Mutual of Omaha. But then later on, then of course, after I got a real job, in a full-time job, it was the beginning of, I did a lot of APL programming. And APL was used very widely in the actuarial field because it's, how do I say that? It's more mathematically intuitive. You know, even if you do not understand programming, if you understand math, you can do the programming part. So I actually was pretty good. And that's the time I actually realized that I thought I was not good in math, but actually I'm pretty good in logic, you know, because a lot of these things are about logic thinking. And then of course, later on the computer came out, and I remember I was working for John Hancock in Boston at that point. And I decided, even though my job was really, I was in the investment fields, so the market closed at 3:30 or something like that. So I actually had a pretty easy life after 3:30, you know, so I could go home around 4. But I decided I would take on additional job for other departments in the company. So I work in the investment side, the product development side, but I work on projects for financial side, financial department. I also work for the international department. So I work in 3 departments. So I decided I need to have a computer at home. At that time, very few people actually has a computer at home. So, and I don't remember how much I was making, not that much, but I spent $7,000 on the personal computer.
Wow. Wow. That's, I mean.
So this is the commitment, you know, and this is for the work that not related to my day job. Yes. This is the additional work I'm working on. So I spent the time understanding how to do spreadsheets. So I did a lot of modeling on spreadsheets at that point. Of course, then later on, you know, so talking about technology, later on, I was lucky enough to become a more managerial position. So I don't need to do all of that. But I thought it was interesting. It was like maybe 10 years later, at one time at a party over cocktails, one guy came to me and said, "You're Shirley Shao." I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I work for Hancock." So I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I left there for a while now." And the guy said, "I know you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you designed that spreadsheet about financial projection spreadsheet." I'm like, "My goodness, are you guys still using that?" I mean, this is 10 years later. You know, you should be much more advanced by now. But anyway, so a little bit long story about the technology advancement. Later, I was not in touch as much because I became a manager.
Right.
I don't need to do those things anymore. So,
but it shows your contributions to the profession. You know, that if you invented this kind of standard spreadsheet that, you know, many companies adapted, and who knows, maybe some institutions of higher learning actually, you know, taught using that spreadsheet, then it shows the impact that you had just on an educational level. That's that's impressive. And so we know that you worked extensively in the United States. You worked for John Hancock. You worked for Mutual of Omaha. There were some other companies in the U.S. that you worked for, but you've gone kind of back and forth between China, Taiwan, and the U.S. Can you tell us about some of the cultural differences in the workplace that you see? I mean, what are some of the differences between conducting business in China versus the U.S., and then how have you negotiated those differences?
Okay, I think the first thing is I try to understand. Wherever I go, I really try to understand the local culture and also the company culture. Now, if we talk about China specifically, China, the culture is more traditional. It's more hierarchy. So I understand that, and then the management style is more authoritarian. I don't mean it in that way. I actually really admire that way, and that's actually part of the reason I went to China. It's because it's a very different way of different management style, different way of running a business. So I did know about those differences. So then my next question is, do I want to be in this environment? And there's a long story about why I decided to move to China, but I did decide that I will move to there, and it will be a good experience for me. So I'm going there just try to learn, basically. Of course, they wanted me to contribute, but I feel like I'm more a learner in the process. So I try to observe what's going on and then try to see how I can influence along the way. So I didn't really just come in with my style, my way of doing this. Time to try to understand their own culture. But in the meantime, I do try to, there's certain core I know I would not, I will always adhere to. There's certain personality, for example, I'm trying to, I'm the kind of person who always like to transform a business, try to make changes. So I know even if I go to China, I know, and I also work for a very big company, and I know that may be somewhat different, but I think within my kind of area, I still try to transform as much as I can. So that part I didn't really change, but I changed the way I communicate. I became more subtle, not as direct. I don't crack US jokes, I don't talk about footballs. So I think there are many things that I've changed, but I think I do try to stay pretty flexible and try to adapt. I think that's how I try to make a difference. But it is very different. I mean, the company I work for in China is a very large state enterprise. State enterprise means it's actually owned by the party, by the government. But in the meantime, it's also listed in New York Stock Exchange, Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and Shanghai Stock Exchanges. So there was lots of balances between capitalism and communism. So it was a very interesting learning opportunity for me. And I also had the opportunities to meet with investors, and most investors are from the Western world. So I had to act as how do I say that? Like the middle communicator to talk about a different way of seeing things. And I really felt that I benefit quite a bit from that experience.
Right, because my guess is that you were kind of a cultural broker, right? Because you were familiar with the American system, familiar with the Chinese system. And so you could probably translate Chinese practices, Chinese mentality, if you want to call it that. I don't want to overgeneralize or oversimplify, to Westerners, and then vice versa, that you could act as an intermediary for Westerners, saying, well, listen, I have spent a lot of time working in the US. I went to school in the US. Here's how the Chinese might approach a particular situation that might differ a little bit from yours, but here's maybe where we could meet in the middle and do business. And so I'm sure that, in addition to all of your mathematical and actuarial skills, the cultural dimension was probably just as important, if not more important, to your success.
Yes, definitely. I don't think I'm a very high EQ person, but that experience definitely taught me to be definitely has improved my EQ. So it is very important, especially in the Asian culture. It's important actually to establish relationship. So in the US environment, if you're a professional, you work in the work environment, you go home and have your own life, that's that's okay. But I think in the Asian environment, it requires you to put more time on establishing personal relationship. So it's a different type of learning for me. Yes.
Right. No, very, very good. And then I know that you have spent a lot of time in management, both in the United States and in China. Why did you decide to go into management? Was there something that attracted you to it? Was it because of the challenge or for the opportunities for growth? Why did Shirley Shao want to become a boss?
I know. I mean, that's interesting because I never thought about becoming a boss. But later on, I couldn't think about anything but to be a boss. It was like very different personality. Now I'm trying to change back to be more mellow, but because, but I think, I don't know what has come along the way that changed me, because when I first started this actuarial science, I just thought, well, I will go and find a job. And then and that's it. Never thought about doing anything more about this job. And most people think about actuaries. Well, let me explain a little bit about what actuaries do. I guess actuaries are actually good in risk and rewards, understanding risks and understanding rewards, understand the profile. So we use mathematics and probabilities and other math tools to actually put them in the business context. So a lot of people think about actuaries as more technician, as more on the math side, but there's actually a big business application side. So, but in the beginning, I thought of myself as an average technician, actually, not even that good in math. But but later on, I think it maybe is because I'm always interested in learning. So I will move from different departments. Like, I will start maybe with product development. Then I like to know how to look at the company's financials. I like to know how to do investments. I like to know how to do risk management, how to do auditing, how to do strategic planning. So I'm always trying to learn different aspects of the company. I was also interested in knowing not just the company, how to run the company, but also I worked for several years in the consulting firms, try to understand how, as a consultant, how would I see the different business models and how that would, how that may or may not have the effect of working or not working. So I think maybe it's more because I have a more broader interest. And then later on, I felt that I have the ability to pull them together. And so I think things just happen. But I don't know why, I think I do always think that even despite I was not that good, I always felt like I can do something with myself, that belief has always been with me.
Right. And kind of along those lines, I'd like to get back to this issue of risks versus rewards. Mm-hmm. And so as you kind of think about your career, what do you think is the biggest risk you took? And what has been the most rewarding thing about your career up to this point? Okay.
I can talk about two risks other people told me that they thought I was crazy. Okay, so I don't know.
Sure,
you can tell me if those are crazy risks. One is when I was in Boston, as I say, I had a really good job in a big company. I know it's comfortable, and then I just finished all my actuarial exams, so I was 30 years old, and then I couldn't speak much English, despite that I had been in the States for several years by that time. I couldn't even write one page of memo, and I couldn't talk in the staff meeting, where staff meeting are people I work with every day. I couldn't even report my own progress. So it was that bad. So but then I made a decision that I would join the best consulting firm. So, and the firm took me. And people thought I was crazy because, what do people do in a consulting firm? They write papers. The products to the clients are usually in two forms. One is talking and the other one is reporting format, So, and plus to talk to your clients, you need to sell. You also need to have that communication skills. So I lack both. So people thought I was looking for trouble. I mean, people were really shocked that I decided to do that. And I guess my thinking is that that's exactly why I did that. because I like those things. So that's why I go. So when people tell me I was crazy, I say, well, yeah, I think the company that's really crazy is that consulting firm who decided to take me on. They were taking a lot of risks, For me, my resume is going to look good. I have this on my resume, this excellent company on my resume. So I didn't think I was taking a lot of risks, but other people thought I was crazy. And I did go through horrible, horrible years over there. So yeah, I was horrible. So there's no second way to talk, I was definitely terrible. But I did learn. I went in thinking about learning the communications, able to talk. I went in thinking that I would build connections to companies because consulting firms usually have clients. And I want to be connected to a client and to my next job. And I was thinking about international job. So that's how I got my first international job. So I accomplished all those goals despite I had a horrible performance in the meantime.
Well,
so sorry to the company.
Well, it's interesting, when you talk about writing and communications and presentations, because obviously you communicate wonderfully well. You present yourself perfectly, and you're a very accomplished writer and even scholar. I mean, because I have read some of your research articles, for trade publications in actuarial sciences, and they're detailed, but a layperson can understand them. So you definitely have a sense of who your audience is and how to communicate to them in a very clear and concrete manner.
Well, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Russ, for such a kind comment. I think I overcame because I will come back to talk about the second risk I took.
Oh, sure.
I overcame myself. I overcame a barrier for myself. It was early on. I thought I have to be good in English. Okay, mm-hmm. I thought English excellency is a secret to success until I went to a conference. Actually, this conference was a day and a half conference with all English native speaking speakers. There were about 7 or 8 of them. There was only one guy, Tom Ho. He's a famous NYU professor, and he's from Hong Kong, so he didn't speak perfect English. So at the end of the conference, we were asked to rate each speaker. I found myself giving him the highest rating. So I thought, wait a minute, his English was the worst. Like, why did I rate him the highest? And he made me understand English is a tool to communicate. If English is good, then if English proficiency and excellency is on the critical path, then I would think all the English majors would get all the top jobs. So that's the first time I thought, oh well, I should not be so scared. I should step outside my comfort zone, and if Tom can do it, so could I. So that's how he really made me realize that. So I took a lot of opportunity, particularly with my trade, with my actuarial organizations. I try to run different things, try to have a lot of opportunity to speak and to write. And I have to tell you, some of the comments, some of the rating I got from my speaking was horrible. Oh. Very discouraging, very, very discouraging. But I decided I would not let that stop me. I just kept on practicing, and moving on. So.
Well, and obviously there were many rewards to your continued effort and your continued practice.
Yes, very much so. And in fact, I think the rewards, now talking about the reward side, one of the reward was, as I say, when I worked for China Life, I actually had to face investors, and I do a lot of road shows. And the road shows, for example, I would come to Wall Street, and then I would meet with investors. And sometimes there were 7, 8 people in the room, and I have 7, 8 meetings a day. So it was very, very stressful. And these are very smart people. So they don't have any patience. They need short answers. They need quick answers. They need to the point immediately. So I felt that that was also good training for me. So I had a lot of practices along the way. So really.
And I would think in those meetings that that at some moment, there must have been some difficult gender dynamics at play. As well. I mean, in some cases, you might have been the only woman in a meeting full of hard-nosed businessmen,
Yes.
who wanted quick answers and who didn't have any time for extended discussion. I mean, how did you, and I don't know if there are many women in actuarial sciences, but my guess is that when you started out, there probably weren't that many. So how did you navigate sort of the difficulties and the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated profession and then being a manager, when, probably there were very few female heads of departments or units at that time?
Right. When I started, there were definitely very few female actuaries. So now I'm so happy. I think it's over half our female actuaries. Yeah. So definitely time has changed. But at that time, yes, that was a challenge. And I was aware of the challenge, but I guess I really didn't let that stop me, even though I was interviewing for a top job as the president of a company, and I was told that they would not take that risk on me because because I'm a female. So this did bother me, but I usually would not I would not dwell too much on that. I will move on. I will try the best I can because I do believe there are many doors to be open for me. So I don't really worry about those things too much. But I do want to share one experience when I was in Taiwan. When I moved to Taiwan, this is for Prudential to set up a brand new operation in Taiwan. And at that time, everybody in the industry is male. Actually, maybe that's also true today, but lots of male. And and at that time, I already worked in the Western environment for 10 years. So I was very Westernized, even though Taiwan is my home country. So I moved back. I have to rethink about the whole strategy, how to work with all these male in a very different environment, even though it's my hometown. So I definitely changed the way I communicate as well. But I think one part I did not change is really, I'm very big on volunteerism, just work for, I don't know, no real purpose. I guess just I like to help out if I can. So I help a real large organization. They happen to be hosting an international conference that year, and they didn't have any experience in doing so. So I just went in and really helped them with that particular conference. So a couple of years later, the executive, this is the biggest company in Taiwan, the executive, the head of the company told me that because of knowing me, he actually decided to launch an internal study to understand why female employees in his company do not move up, progress in their career. And they made several changes to their policies to support the female employees. So I feel that I do understand that, but I don't really let that bother me too much. And I think, so I guess probably I'm just lucky. It worked out fine. Although I did not get that president job, so that was not good.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that you've been more than lucky. You've been very talented, and that you've been a real trailblazer and a role model. And that kind of leads me to my next question, and that is, I would assume that you have mentored many women in your field. Is that the case? And if so, what have your mentees, the people that you've mentored, gone on to do with their careers?
Yes, I do mentor quite a few people. They all went on doing different things, and I do not necessarily encourage them to stay in the actuarial field, even though they may start initially in this field. For example, one of my mentees, he actually went on to be a pretty successful person in the investment field. And another person who just contacted me recently, and she actually started with a completely different field. She was actually in the investment field and decided to come into the actuarial field. And she had a lot of questions and, just not sure about, is this the right thing to do? So just I think the mentees and mentor, that's a really hard, how do I say that, to build that bond. I think, you need to have some chemistry, because I I also have my share of mentors as well. I just feel like there's certain people that definitely make impact on you. I think it's just because of chemistry, because I feel that it's probably more the same kind of people rather than different kind of people are more easier to influence the other person. So I feel that that's my experience with a mentor-mentee relationship. So.
All right, very good, very good. And then I'd like to maybe change the subject a little bit to sort of the current world economic situation. I know that is no small topic. It's a very big topic, but we're still fighting the pandemic worldwide. I don't know how that has affected your particular field of finance, insurance, actuarial sciences, but maybe you could say a little bit about how you've been dealing with the pandemic, and maybe how your business practices or your business philosophy has changed or evolved because of COVID.
Oh, okay. Well, during this pandemic, I decided to stop working in the insurance field. I actually started working in the Buddhism field. So completely different field. I'm pursuing a more spiritual growth at this point. So it's definitely has affected me because I became a teacher in this field, and even though I was a student as well, but my teacher asked me to do the instructions. So I have started doing instructions, and I have been learning to do this through remotely because of the pandemic. So definitely has changed my relationship with some of the people I work with. So right now I'm teaching every Sunday. Actually, my time is Saturday night. But before, I usually have groups to work with. We can sort of try to study together because there's lots of work rather than just to understand all the history and all the books, because there's so many books to read. But other than that, there's also meditation. There's also qigong. There are also various things that we need to work and then kind of share experiences. So now that really we could not do this together, like in the one room. So that has really changed that side of my little world now. So,
right, and I can imagine that many people have turned to spiritual practice, because of the pandemic, and so my sense is that you have found an audience and found a new way to communicate. It must be, though, still quite a contrast between the business world and this kind of spiritual meditative realm. How have you managed that transition?
It was I made the decision overnight, so it was a very abrupt decision. So but then once I'm the kind of person, once I make a decision, I don't really look back. I just I just move on. So I actually adjust pretty quickly. I became a very devoted student for a full year. So I did a lot of practices. I slept maybe about 4 hours a day. I still do maybe about 5 hours a day. So it's just so much work to do. So it's just a way, it's a complete different way of learning. So I'm still trying to connect if there's any connection to the previous learning I had. So sometimes I felt, is this really in the spiritual world? Is it really the same? Is it really different? Is it really just a different way of talking about the same thing? Or is it just something completely different? So I'm still learning myself. So this has been about 4 years now. I'm still learning, but I'm working very hard. I'm working very hard at this.
Well, I would imagine that, the discipline, the practice, the presence of mind that you needed in the business world has probably been quite useful, in moving to this kind of spiritual focus.
Yes, that definitely. Sometimes people think the spiritual focus is more relaxed and all that. No, it requires a lot of work. So you're absolutely right, Russ. You're dead on. I think the discipline is extremely important. And then, and especially you don't have at work, you have hours and all that. This is all up to you. So you have to be really disciplined to yourself. And then to reflect yourself, to think about what's going on in your mind and try to understand all of that, to try to understand your own body, to try to understand other people around you. So it's actually quite a bit learning. And the way that I learned how to be focused at my work before, I think one of my strengths at work is that I was a very focused person. I can work very long hours with the same level of focus. I don't, my energy level is very high. So I definitely try to apply in this world as well. So that was very helpful.
And it's difficult to maintain focus, I think, especially these days, because people are always on their phones. They can be distracted very, very easily.
Yes.
And so you lose that type of, or it's very easy to lose that discipline to disruption. And so for you to be able to, maintain that presence of mind and that concentration is pretty remarkable, because I see, we all see it, that distraction is almost kind of a permanent state of mind now. It's almost become dominant. And that focus really has to fight distraction in order to maintain itself.
Yes, absolutely. I used to pride myself, I can handle 5 things at one time. I can have 5 staff in my room telling me different things. I could handle each one of them and say, that's how I was. That's how my mind used to work. Now I have to train myself to think about one thing at a time. But I did learn, and then even sometimes don't even think about that one thing. Like when something really important coming up, I would say, okay, don't think about anything, just go to do meditation. And to me, that's crazy. Like when I was in business world, why I would never do that. I want to use every minute of my life. I wouldn't consider this meditation as a productive time. But then through this last several years, I did learn, actually, it's pretty amazing. For example, I may have lots of things going on, but then if I go into the meditation, immediately all the answers come to me very quickly. And usually they're always the right answer. I don't need to spend time analyzing all that. Right. They're just there, So it's actually a very effective way of doing business.
Well, I think it's, and I'm no expert, but I've heard it said that it's the other parts of the brain that are processing the information, and so it's not like the brain is being shut down. It's just working in a different way, and it's producing kind of the answers that or the solutions that you are looking for. It just doesn't necessarily come right away. It appears sort of unsummoned.
Right. So for somebody who's used to analytical and the world, it's a completely different experience. But I find this to be a very fruitful experience. So
exactly. No, well, this is wonderful, Shirley. So let's turn now to the questions from our audience, and they were submitted earlier, and just a glance at them, tells us that while these questions kind of cover some of the topics that we have discussed, they do go into different areas, and so we welcome these questions and the participation from our audience. So the first question is the following: what is the most challenging task that you have encountered in your actuarial career, and how did you overcome it?
Okay. I guess, well, I think the first challenge I would say is what I talked about earlier. It's actually overcoming myself to make sure. So I think I need to know that I actually can do these things despite of my math. I actually learned, even though my math is not good, but I'm actually very good in numbers and very good in critical thinking, the logic part. So I know I can do that. So it's kind of more about learning myself, even though my English is not perfect, but I think I can use a lot still using this language to accomplish a lot. So the first part is to overcoming myself and understand I can do it. I can be successful. I wasn't looking for that at all, but later on I quickly realized that. So I think that was the first challenge for me to overcome myself. The most challenging job, maybe it's the assignment I took for potential in Taiwan. I was given a job to set up a company, actually in full operation in 10 months. Okay, so that means you need to have everybody hired, all the products developed, all the systems in places, and all the branch office set up and stuff like that. And it was very challenging because I've never set up a company before. That was the first time I was given this job to set up a company. So, so that was challenging, but also I never been so involved with so many different areas of the company to set them up. So that was a quick learning opportunity for me to know what to do in each one of the areas and how to sort of put them all back together so they can be all in business and in sync in 10 months. And also talking about the Western and Eastern culture differences, I think that was the first time I was really directly running into that because this is a large US company, obviously. So the large US company and traditional companies, they are very big on planning. So they're excellent. They have lots of planning tools and excellent in anticipating issues and risks and stuff like that and going through different scenarios. But then I also face the entire staff, which is they're all local Taiwanese people. So they're more used to just roll up the sleeves and do it. So they didn't understand why we're wasting time when we don't have time on all this planning. And so I think I was kind of caught in between the two cultures and tried to see how we can work it through, that we do some planning, but we also roll up our sleeves and just try to do it. And I remember one of the staff was so frustrated. He came to me and say, by the time you finish planning, we would have done this thing 5 times and already corrected all the mistakes, It's like, and you haven't even started yet. So what's, but anyway, so try to sort of blend the two cultures and try to be, as Russ say, be a broker again, in that situation. I think that was challenging, particularly given the time and given the newness of everybody. But I think, that's actually, probably was the most rewarding experience as well, because the team really at the end pulled together. And I think many years later, now we're still talking about those days, that particular team, because everybody really viewed that as it was the highlight of their whole career, so we were able to work through in such a, how do I say that? I don't say cohesive. It was just a great team. That's all I can say. That everybody felt the team. Everybody know we need to pitch in for each other. So in order for that to be successful, so it was a wonderful experience.
Right, and those bonds are so important to the success of any unit. It really all begins and ends with human relationships. Right. So here's another question that actually was just submitted, and this is career advice that you might give to students. And so the participant asks, should we, the undergraduate actuarial students, focus on our professional exams during our undergraduate years, or should we look into a double major degree like finance, risk management, et cetera, to get some business background? So what would you advise the student to do? Okay.
Well, I actually went through the business background and then at actuarial science. And I actually think the reason I actually stand out a little bit is because my business background. So, I was, because, and Russ said that earlier, that I was able to kind of communicate probably more in the business context. So I think to have that business context is extremely important. Now, whether you need to go to school to learn that, to me, that's not necessarily the case. You could learn that elsewhere as well. If you decide to pursue the actuarial science, definitely try to finish as many exams as you can. I will focus on that. But then later on, when you go to the work environment, try to pick up an opportunity to learn the business side. Try to have exposures to other departments. And for me, I actually do a lot of volunteering work in my own actuarial organizations. I was actively involved in the Society of Actuaries and American Academy of Actuaries. And through there, you actually learn a lot of business, what other companies are doing. And you learn, you have the connections, you have the network of other people, you know the industry. So, I mean, there are many ways to learn business, so I think if you only have one choice, I actually would just do that. I would do the exams and get that over with.
Very good. Thank you. Next question, Shirley, from an audience member is, how did you make friends with people in the United States or a new city, when you first arrived there? Because that can be difficult. You've moved around a lot. How did you make friends in these new places?
Well, first foremost, because I moved to most places because of work. So of course I make friends through work kind of relationship. That's probably the most natural extension of the social life. And then of course, sometimes it's friends, and sometimes because I do volunteering work, I know some of the organizations. So various ways. I don't think there's a particular way how I meet friends. I'm not sure. I guess definitely takes time because it's difficult to meet friends quickly, and especially if you move around a lot and you don't stay in one city very long, and then it's difficult. But typically I stay usually about 5 years. If I move around, usually at least 5 years. So usually by the second and third years, I would have some friends that I socialize with.
And certainly joining organizations, social clubs, things like that can really help. And so this question, I think, relates to another one that was posed beforehand. And so you moved around a lot, and how did your family adapt? That must have been challenging as well.
Yes, it's very challenging, and this is why I actually stayed put for quite a few years when I was with Prudential in the U.S. Because that's the time when my daughter was born. I moved around a lot before my daughter was born, but after my daughter came, originally I thought I would stay put in one place until she goes to college. That was my original thinking. But then there were various opportunities came along. I didn't take them. But 1 year when the China Life opportunity came up, I asked my daughter whether she was ready to move. And she happened to be suffering from school with friendship. So she said, yes, I will take that, let's move. So we moved to Beijing. And all I can say is that she cried for 1 year. 1 year, entire year, the first year she was there. She was going through junior high school, had a horror, despite that she had a good friend, she was still suffering quite a bit. But then I think after a year or so, she actually went back to visit her friends because she went to a private school when she was in US from kindergarten and supposedly going all the way through high school. So it's that kind of setup. So she knew these friends for a long time. So she went back and she talked to these friends again. She said, well, she actually could see the difference. She felt that she actually experienced something that's completely different than her friends, and she could see the benefits. So, but I think this is a very personal choice. I think it's, sometimes it's better for the family just to stay in one place, and sometimes it's not. So I think this is all individual decisions. I have no idea how to balance. I think these are just personal choices.
Right. And then kind of along those lines, what tips do you have for students who are seeking careers in international fields?
I think, in international fields, if you can, when you're in school, try to see if you can get an internship. I think the internship is extremely important. And try to get as many lined up as you could when you're doing your undergrad school years. And then try to look for a company that has international operations. And then just try to get in the door first. And once you're in the door, it's easier to then move around to different areas. So that's one way. The way I did it was I actually went through a consulting firm. And the consulting firm is very difficult for the how do I say that, for newly graduate. I think that's somewhat challenging. So that's probably more later on in the career. And that's where I got to, the consulting firm I went with, I specialize in international kind of projects. And that's where I knew some of the companies and got some of the connections through that experience. So, and obviously talk to people. When I was in China, I get lots of resumes and got a lot of people calling me and try to understand, how do I get a job here? How do I, and I always try to help people, not just with my company, but if I knew there were some other companies having opportunities, I always try to refer them. So try to talk to as many people as you can. And I was, I go, one of my mentee, I actually met her because I gave a speech in somewhere, and she came as in the audience, and then she just stopped me and harassed me for so many years. So just try to harass people. You saw somebody doing a speech that you may like. You may like her or you may like him. Just try to stop and talk to them and ask for help. So
right. And I think that aligns with the last question from the audience, and that is, what should actuarial students do right now to get the most out of their college years as a major in actuarial science?
Wow, my college philosophy is have fun. So I don't know, okay. I do that myself. So I don't know. I would say have some fun first. But as you already in the actuarial science field, obviously finish as many exams as you can, and then try to take some business courses along the way if you can. And then try to talk to your professors about, try to get internship opportunities, and try to, I don't know, try to not to overstress over this whole thing. You will be successful. We're all born because there's a particular purpose, and just believe in yourself. You will do just fine.
Well, that's a wonderful answer, Shirley. And on that note, I think we will conclude. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you for all you've done to represent the University of Iowa throughout your career. We're very, very proud of what you've done and accomplished, over the last few decades. Thank you for being a member of the Hawkeye family, and thank you for being part of the Global Alumni Spotlight Series. So with that, we wish you all the best, continued good luck with your pursuit of Buddhism and anything else that is presented in your life, and we hope to be able to stay in touch. This particular broadcast will be recorded. It will be archived on the International Programs site, so you can view it at your leisure. And so, just in closing, let me thank the audience. Let me thank our communications team and international programs. And again, heartfelt thanks to Shirley Shao for her wisdom and her experience in sharing all of that with us tonight.
Well, thank you, Dean, for this great opportunity for me to be able to share that hour with you and with the audience. It's really been an honor. It's just great to be an alumni. Really, really a big honor. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you again,
Okay,
Shirley.
And good night.
Good night. Thank you. And let me wish everyone a pleasant good evening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.